Just ahead on American Black Journal, 50 years after the Voting Rights Act, stricter rules are making it more difficult for African Americans and Hispanics to go to the polls. We'll talk about efforts to protect the right to vote. Plus, this year marks the 30th anniversary of Detroit's premier waterfront concert venue, Chene Park. We'll look back at its history and ahead to its future. American Black Journal starts right now.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the historic Voting Rights Act. President Lyndon Johnson signed the act into law on August 6, 1965. And from that day on, voting became a right, a real right, for minorities who had long been denied equal access to the polls. However, today, several states have enacted stricter voter ID laws and eliminated early voting. These tougher rules and regulations are excluding hundreds of thousands of Americans. Joining me now are two people working to protect the right to vote, Reverend Wendell Anthony, who's president of the Detroit branch of the NAACP, and Stephanie Gilmore, who is policy analyst for the Consortium of Hispanic Agencies. Thank you both for being here. Reverend Anthony, about a week and a half ago, I wrote a column about the 50th anniversary of VRA and said I didn't really feel like celebrating because it's under such attack. And instead I said we need to remember. We need to remember why the act was necessary. Absolutely. We need to remember all the fighting that involved getting it passed. And we need to remember how it was not that long ago. This is all within most people's lifetimes that you could not just show up at the polls and vote if you were an African American in a lot of places.
You're absolutely correct, Stephen. Thanks for doing this piece on it. And I would encourage you to continue to write about it, not declare that we still have some struggles to wage. We thought we had crossed the bridge, but it seems that that bridge has been torn down. Lyndon Johnson, and God bless him in his rest, said during this whole period of trying to bring some equity in voting that the power of the vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man to bring down the walls of injustice and to destroy the barriers which create the imprisonment simply because one man is different from another man. He said that. Now we find that 50 years later, we find that African Americans and members of the Hispanic Latino community are being targeted. Early voting is being targeted. 33 states have now enacted laws or have ordinances that are preventing African Americans and people and minorities to vote. The Brennan Institute out of New York University indicated that of the 12 states where Hispanics have increased their voting capacity, 9 have devised laws. Of the 11 where African Americans are increasing their voting, that 7 have increased the laws to prevent them. So
these laws are in direct response to surges in the voting.
And thank God that in Texas recently the court pushed back that nefarious law, and which was causing 600,000 people to be disenfranchised. So it's a crisis situation.
Yeah. Stephanie, I think one of the things that's interesting about the VRA is that it gets framed almost always exclusively as being about African Americans getting access to the polls, but Hispanic voters were just as affected by discrimination and have seen voter access increase just as much because of VRA.
Yes, a lot of our people in our community are very fearful of even going to the polls, especially in some of the things I've been trying to educate people on is that a lot of them do have some undocumented people in their family. So just that access to government fears them because they are afraid of bringing any undue attention to those family members, especially with new Senate bills such as that Mike Cowell is trying to do with getting rid of sanctuary cities, which is causing even more fear in their household.
Talk about that bill. What sanctuary cities are and what it would do if that bill.
So if that bill is to go and to be enacted, that anyone who's been pulled over for, it could be any minor traffic offense, as long as they have some as long as they have some inclination of thinking that they're undocumented, they can hold them, and then they can actually report them to be deported. And so that's very fearful, because now you have people who are working class people who are fearful even driving down the street, let alone, like, having a simple traffic offense, for the fact that they can easily be reported to ICE, and before you know it, they're deported back to Mexico,
right,
or wherever their country is. But the other thing is that the biggest fear, I guess, is that there's also no, at most of our polls, we're always advocating to have bilingual, and that's not something that's accessible at this point. And so either having a no excuse absentee to allow them to have a translator in their house, or having even bilingual polls will make it a lot easier for a lot of our residents to be able to access that voting right.
Yeah. It strikes me as not insignificant that this year's the 50th anniversary of the VRA. It's also the 50th anniversary of the Watts riots.
Yes.
It's the 48th anniversary, almost the 50th anniversary of the riots or rebellion here in Detroit. Past is present, and past is future in America in lots of ways. Right. All of these issues seem not to have left us in that time.
And you're absolutely correct. It's not and we celebrate, but yet we must be motivated to still go out and do the action and to work on these issues. It's so unfortunate that in America, you would think that the right to vote, the access to the polls should be free and open, and we should be embracing and bringing people to the poll. It's not a black issue, it's not a white issue, it's not a brown, red issue. It's an American issue. And when you deny black and brown people access to the polls, you're denying America the right. You have taken away your moral authority to go to other nations to talk about democratization and the right to vote, which Jimmy Carter, and we pray his health, and others have led and been a part of that. So I would simply say that right now, as we're sitting here, the National NAACP is on a 860-mile march. It started on August the 1st in Selma, Alabama, and they're going to Washington, D.C., touching 7 states along the way. And the purpose of that is to stimulate and to recall folk to the right to vote, to say that we need to put meat back into the Voting Rights Act. You know, the Supreme Court gutted it. Yeah. They gutted Section 5, Section 4B, which the pre-clearance part of that. We know that as soon as they did that, states already had laws in hand. Here, now that we got this passed, we can go and block folks' right to vote. So we have some real issues here. And now is a call for all of America, not just black and brown people, but all of America who believe in the right to vote, to come out and say, let's take our souls to the polls and vote.
Yeah. You talked about the legislation that Senator Coleman has introduced. What kinds of other pieces of legislation do we need to push back against? I mean, here in Michigan, we don't talk that much about the Voting Rights Act or the things that are being done to erode it.
So some of the other legislation that really affects our community, because we have a lot of immigrants, we have a couple of our organizations that are really working on getting the municipal ID, which will also help with voting rights, not just for our citizens that are minority citizens, but it will also help for those who are homeless.
Right.
To finally,
that's a poverty issue.
Yeah, to finally have some form of identification in which they could possibly take to the polls. And that's something that we would like to have as a form of identification.
They're doing that now in Washtenaw, correct?
They're doing that in Washtenaw, and then we've been working with the mayor's office to try to push the municipal IDs in the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have the Immigration Task Force is working on it, and also one of our associate members, One Michigan, has been really pushing on that. They want to have something that's very close to what's going on in Washtenaw and also in New York City, to be able to have that in Detroit, which would give them a lot more access to various things throughout the city, but not only that, to also give them a form of identification that they can possibly use at the polls.
Yeah.
And Stephen, let me just say this. We have, in the NAACP, we have never been against identification at the polls. Driver's license, fine, the basics, ID. It is when you want to issue a government-issued license or photo ID. Photo ID laws are really resolutions in search of a problem. The problem does not exist.
Right.
And in Texas, as an example, you can use your gun certificate, your gun registration,
but not a student
but you can't
ID.
use your student ID. Come on, this is America. So obviously something is wrong with this, and so we're simply saying we should be able to register and vote on the same day.
Right.
We should be able to have early voting. We should not penalize people who've been overseas fighting in Iraq or Afghanistan who came back home and were not able to vote or register to deny those very people who are protecting us and our right from the same basic right that they're over there protecting. And I'm simply saying we can do better than this. And I think that the push for us is to make sure that we preserve what we have gotten, because it ain't over.
Right.
50 years we've struggled.
We're still
we got
arguing
50
about this.
years in front of us, and it should not be this way.
We've got about 3 minutes left. I want to shift the conversation just a little bit to voter turnout, because when the Supreme Court last heard this case, that was one of the pushbacks, was that voter turnout since the Voting Rights Act passed has not grown in the way that it should in minority communities. We can look at Detroit, not enough people turn out to vote, or any place really in America. What are the things that we need to be doing to build on that? And it's not that we haven't. I mean, of course, the NAACP in particular has registered millions of people to vote. But what are the things we need to do to make sure, because that's ultimately how you change policy, is getting people to vote and elect different people.
No question about it.
Go ahead.
What I'm doing right now is I'm working with ACLU and also APIA Votes, and I'm also on the Michigan Election Coalition and Michigan Redistricting Coalition. So my efforts that I really want to focus on is trying to educate our community about the importance of voting, not just registering them, because I mean you have to go a little bit further than just that.
Right.
I mean, registering them does not necessarily mean that they're going to go to the polls.
Up,
But I think a lot of the legislation that's impacting our immigrant community will get them the fuel that they need to have to want to make that change. Knowing that there's legislators out there that are really going to be impinging on their basic rights will get them a little bit infuriated to want to actually go to the polls and make those changes, especially trying to educate them on the importance of redistricting laws too, because they say, okay, one thing is about going to the polls, but also how their vote will really impact the redistricting too.
We are very much concerned about it. It has been abysmal. People came out in 2008 and 2012 for Obama.
Sat home in 10 and 14.
And that's where we're catching all of this stuff. Obama is not going to be on the ballot in 2016.
Right.
Obama's in the White House, but we're still catching hell in our own house, economically and socially and all the other ways. We're simply saying that you got to get out and vote, register and then vote. We have enough people that are already registered, Stephen, but the issue is getting them to the polls to vote. And when you don't vote, you are voting. People need to understand that.
You're making a decision.
You're letting other folk determine your own destiny. And if you don't vote, you really are not having a voice in terms of the transitioning in the direction of society. So we are educating people. We'll be doing door knocking. We're going to be having forums. The march that I talked about right now is designed to stimulate and get people back engaged in the process. I think you're writing and other folks writing. I think this segment and other segments that we can do, folk need to understand that it is a life and death issue.
All right. Hopefully 50 years from now, we are not sitting around talking about this.
Somebody might, but I don't think we will.
It won't be us, right? Thanks for being here, both of you. Just ahead on American Black Journal, it's been 30 years since Chene Park transformed Detroit's riverfront. We'll take a look at the venue's past, present, and future right after this look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African-American life in Detroit. This week in 1995, recording artist Bobby DeBarge of the group Switch died. In 1954, Detroit-born Ralph J. Bunch was named United Nations Undersecretary. And in 1967, Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's Your Precious Love was released. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African-American Life in Detroit.
Chene Park is celebrating 30 years as Detroit's entertainment jewel on the riverfront. The concert venue was the vision of Mayor Coleman Young, who wanted to redevelop the riverfront and give Detroiters more access to its beauty. Chene Park has hosted hundreds of superstar artists in a unique outdoor setting.
traveling or?
Chene Park is managed and operated by The Right Productions. I'm pleased to have the president and CEO here today, Shahida Mausi-Johnson. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I have to say, full disclosure, I grew up not far from the riverfront. I've lived there most of my life. I remember when Chene Park opened, and I remember, more importantly, what was there before. When I was a kid, we didn't go down to the riverfront because it was dirty and it was industrial. It was sort of dangerous.
It was.
And I can remember when they said, hey, you know what? We're going to have a concert venue there and we're going to start changing. Most people who are celebrating the riverfront today and all the great things that are happening don't remember that this was that first step in turning things around.
It was, and it was under Mayor Young's administration that the first 3 linked riverfront parks took place as part of the recreation department. And Chene Park was initially just a stage with the backing onto the river and a hill.
Right, I remember that.
I was there too. I spent a big part of my life at Chene Park. But we did Carmen McRae there, and it was raining that day. And people came with umbrellas and sat on the hill, right? Waited for the rain to leave. And there were 6,000 people, and Mayor Young said, well, let's really build this out.
Yeah.
And it has been built out 3 times since then, but it's there, strong. The shows go on.
Yeah, I mean, now it's a lot bigger. I mean, I would say that you can see it from lots of points along the river or even back into the city. The band shell, I think, is the thing that most people I identify with. Talk about the acts, though, that have been there. I can remember as a teenager standing on the front steps of my house listening to some big names down at Chene Park, but that's been true since the beginning and is certainly true now.
It is. It's an important part of the community. It is just a mile from downtown, just a mile from the Renaissance Center, but we've had all kinds of acts at Chene Park. Since the 12 years that my company has been managing and operating it, we've had from Bollywood shows to rap shows to, well, the jazz series has been going on for 30 years since Carmen McRae days.
Right.
And so that's just been a constant on Wednesday nights. And there's such a community. It's not just a venue.
Yeah.
It's community.
It is. And you can really feel that, I think, if you live or work anywhere near it, the number of people who come and seem to come over and over. And it does seem like it's growing. I mean, I don't know if your attendance is up, but it does seem more and more crowded each summer.
It is, and new people are finding it, and people are coming for the first time and saying,
I can't believe this was here, right? Right.
We did tryouts for Wheel of Fortune, and folks came that had never been before, and they're like, really?
Right.
You know, yeah.
Chene
Park is a great place to spend a summer night. And with the 30th anniversary with Aretha Franklin as the first time that she's coming
to else,
Chene Park. And she's bringing with her the Isley Brothers.
Yeah.
So that night is just going to be dynamic.
Right. Let's talk about what date that night is going to be.
That is Saturday, August 22nd, 8 p.m., not to be missed.
Yeah.
She is absolutely looking forward to her first performance at Chene Park, and being a part of that community that exists there.
Yeah. Talk about, I mentioned earlier that this was the first sort of turn on the riverfront toward that public access, that sort of park space. Now you've got a lot of neighbors, you got a lot of company down at Chene Park. How does that fit in with, how does Chene Park fit in with everything else?
Well, if you ask the businesses up and down Jefferson and around on McDougal, you'll find that when we do business, they do business.
Yeah,
so really Chene Park and the arts generally are part of an economic engine. It's part of an industry.
Yeah.
And it's an industry that Detroit has deep roots in. So from the creating business, from developing artists, to producing venues for them to perform in, and to distribute their work all across the world.
Yeah.
Chene Park is a part of an industry in Detroit, and that's something that really people need to be aware of. We employ over 300 people at Chene Park every summer.
Right. That's real economic.
That's real economic
activity. And I also feel like it's a venue where you can see people who are not necessarily going to be on stage at some of the other venues around town. I mean, I feel like there's still an access issue that Chene Park really fulfills.
Well, it's nice to be independent.
Right? You're not part of the circuits that, that some of the other venues have.
We're not Live Nation.
Right.
We're not AG. We're the Right Productions.
Yeah.
And we're homegrown, and it's a family business.
Right.
And we get to do things like bringing Aretha with the Isley Brothers, which they've not shared a stage before.
Right.
But I can call one and call the other.
But you can
get them
work
together.
that all out, and
Exactly.
they can do it.
Or when we did Derek May with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. That's the first time in America that has happened.
Yeah.
So as an independent entity, there's a value in that, because you can get creative with it, and you can really connect to your community and serve your community in a unique way.
Right.
And that's what we try to do.
Yeah. And now we have two other concert venues that I can think of right along the riverfront. One in front of the Rents End, which is not a permanent venue, but they do put up a stage and have acts there. But then the West Riverfront is the new one, which is a big sort of almost Pine Knob-like, it seems, kind of stage. Those are different from Chene Park, but do you worry about that maybe there's too much now or too much competition?
Not at all. The unique thing about Chene Park is that it was built and developed as a major concert venue, which means that we've got 6,000 seats, and 5,000 of those are under the canopy.
Under that canopy, right.
So it can rain cats and dogs.
Right, doesn't matter.
All of that, right? And we've got a show.
Yeah.
We have lost one half of one show in 12 years.
Is that right? Wow.
So, you know, it's always rain or shine. You're under the canopy, you're out of the weather, but you're in the evening, in the summertime.
Right.
And that's, you know, Detroit weather can get challenging.
It's one of the real problems around here, right?
So you've got to get your summer on.
Yeah, right.
Really,
we don't have much of it.
You got to take full advantage of it, and Chene Park is where you can do that. The West Riverfront is a new location, but it's not covered at all.
It's not. That's right. There's no protection there, and in fact, a couple weeks ago when they had a festival there, it rained like crazy, and
our show
people
went
left.
on, no problem.
Is that right? So I thought I heard that there are going to be some more changes at Chene Park. You're building some things, right?
We're always working to improve Chene Park. Always working to make it a better experience for our customers and for our artists as well.
Yeah.
It's a great venue. It's won architectural awards. If you haven't been there, it's really beautiful.
It is.
To see the boats come into the backdrop of the stage and a summer breeze.
Yeah, right.
It's outstanding.
So you've got a month or so left in the season this summer. What are some other highlights other than that 30th anniversary concert that people?
Well, that's one. We also have church services at Chene Park sometimes. We've got Second Ebenezer and El Bethel both coming to do church services at Chene Park. So, you know, take it to the water. Which is real.
Yeah.
We do graduations.
I know, the graduations every year, you see all the kids come out.
And we have graduates coming not only from Detroit schools, but from the suburban schools as well. It is a place of coming together. It's a tradition in southeastern Michigan. We also have Return of the Legends. So if you like hip hop, Legends Weekend is Labor Day weekend at Chene Park. So we've got T.I. as the headliner, and he is. I mean, you'd be surprised at the breadth of his audience.
Yeah, right. That's right. It's not who you would. It's not just who you would expect.
It's not just who you would expect. There's some mothers and some grandmothers that are definitely going to come see T.I.
Yeah.
Because he's a gentleman and he's got something on his mind, and that's part of what hip hop is all about.
Sure.
Is sharing thoughts.
Yeah.
And come to Chene Park and think about some things.
Right. So the season closes when?
Well, it looks as though we're going to be closing Labor Day weekend, but
Okay.
stay tuned, that might change.
There might be more. All right. Well, congratulations on 30 years. We'll look forward to the next 30.
And be sure you go to CheneParkDetroit.com or Ticketmaster. There are a lot of scams out there trying to get...
trying to take the false tickets and stuff like that.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finally, all of us here at American Black Journal want to extend our condolences to the family of Arthur Green III. Mr. Green was the president of the Detroit chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. He appeared on this program 2 years ago to talk about the recovery of a Top Gun trophy that was won by the Tuskegee Airmen in 1949. Mr. Green died last week when the small plane he was piloting crashed in northern Michigan. He's survived by his wife and 2 sons. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can also hear our program on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.